Oh, there it should say red.
It's in red, the recording.
We're going to actually get into Matthew and Luke tonight. So we're going to get into doing a little bit of harmony of the Gospels. We'll get into more of that in lessons 11 and 12. And sometimes the lessons will just be from one Gospel, because that's the only Gospel that covered that event. But sometimes we'll have three. There are some that we will have all four Gospels. That gets crowded on your page. Well, we're building our relationship with the Son of God. We're in Lesson 10. We're going to talk tonight about the childhood of Jesus. Here's our little timeline. So we're getting down here. We're going to be right here at age 12. No, age 2 tonight. We're going to be right up here somewhere in the early childhood. And we're also going to cover the age 12. So we're going to cover all of that tonight. The theme for what I want to share with you tonight is how to be the kind of parent that God uses. I grew up in Council Grove, Kansas. Look that up on your Wikipedia. It's the most historical town on the Santa Fe Trail. Actually has more points of historical significance than Dodge City, although Dodge City is more famous because Wyatt Earp was a policeman there for a while, and of course Boot Hill, and who would ever forget Gunsmoke? Of course. Yes. Hey, some of us folks remember Matt Dillon and Gunsmoke. That was Dodge City. So,
I remember Fester.
But Council Grove, Kansas is more significant.
Oh, hi, Liz.
Welcome, welcome. I played in the woods. Mom and Dad had about 5 acres at the edge of town, and half of that was house and garden lots, and then the other half was a chicken yard and fruit trees. And my brother, and behind that was 5 acres of woods. And my brother and I would go back there and play in those woods just day in and day out all the time. We just had a lot of fun playing back there in the woods. You know, a lot of times Mom and Dad didn't know where we were. They knew we were around somewhere, and we knew how to get home when it was time to get home. But we'd be back there playing in the woods. Could have gotten into all sorts of things. The kids could get into the woods, rattlesnakes, you know, deep holes, falling out of trees, like the one we built the tree house in. But I always knew when to be home and when to be, how to be home in time to eat. Hey, we have an Amber Alert. A child is missing. What kind of parent would lose their child? No, not just, but this is not just any child. This is a very special child. Well, now I can see some of you mothers saying, look, if I lost my child, that would be a very special child. Well, we're not going to argue with you on that, but this was the Son of God. Now, I would not... I think it'd be maybe an overwhelming honor if I'd been called to raise a Son of God. I'd probably been scared as much as Joseph was. But didn't have that. Well, here's another one. Did you ever lose a child? Maybe in the store, you're over here and you're shopping at the clothes, and all of a sudden you realize the kids aren't around anywhere. Did you ever get lost? Can you remember how you felt about that incident? Let's see, did I ever get lost with my parents? No, I know I came home one afternoon after school and Mama wasn't home, and I didn't handle that very well, 3rd grade. Because Mama was always home, the house was always unlocked, but the house was locked and Mama wasn't home, and I was scared. Well, let's talk about how we can be the kind of parent that God can use. We know the Son of God has come and gone. None of us are going to get that privilege, not have that responsibility. But, and most of us have raised our children. But, every one of us, I think, just about every one of us, has grandchildren. Which means we have children that are parents of those grandchildren. And if we don't have children that are parents of the grandchildren, then we don't have grandchildren. Or if you do, well, it's like me. I just borrow my wife's grandchildren.
Yep.
So,
when you can, if I let you.
But we have neighbors who have children. And hopefully hopefully the things I'm sharing with you here will impact you enough, and this is why you have room to take notes on page 151 in your book. You've got room to take notes, and you can share this with your neighbors and their children. Because hopefully there's some things in here that would benefit those who couldn't make it here tonight for whatever reason. So how can we be the kind of parent that God would use? Well, first of all, you understand the legacy you leave. Matthew chapter 2, verse 19. After Herod died, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream in Egypt. After Herod the Great dies an ugly and horrible death. If I recall right, I think we'll get into that in just a little bit. He died such an ugly death, nobody wanted to be around him. His body was so eaten up, so putrid that he died very lonely. It's what you get for making yourself out to be God when you're not. An angel tells Joseph in a dream. Now this is the third of 4 times that an angel has appeared to Joseph in the last, well, we could say a couple of years maybe, up to 4 years possibly. To take Jesus, the angel tells Joseph to take Jesus and Mary and go back to their homeland. If you remember, we left them down in Egypt last week. So they were down there. We don't know how long. So it's time for him to go back to where he came from. Now this time urgency isn't an issue. They have time to pack. They have time to decide what they're going to take, what they're going to leave behind. They have time to say goodbye to their Egyptian neighbors. I'm sure they got to know some while they were there. Joseph probably did some carpentry for them since that was his skill and trade. And so they can settle out and they don't have to rush because they're not in fear of their lives like the last time they moved. Jesus is between, here's a picture. I don't know. I kind of doubt that they got over to the Nile to see the pyramids. We'll see that in just a minute. The angel tells Joseph to go home. The urgency isn't important. Jesus is between 2 and 4 years of age. Now, we're basing that partly on the fact that Herod died about 4 BC. So, again, we won't know for exact certain until we get to heaven. Then we'll get it all figured out, but it gives you a ballpark of where to know. He's still a very young, small boy.
4 BC or AC?
AD.
AD. 2 and 4, yeah, he'd be 2 and 4 years. Well, he was born 4 BC, so it'd be about 0 BC or 0 AD now, theoretically. Give or take a year or two. As parents, you are building a legacy through your children. And how you raise them up is very important. Just for thought, look back at your parents. I know some of you got to think way, 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 way back, but try the best you can. Do you recognize any personality traits in you, any characteristics in you that you do just like Dad did or just like Mom did? I've caught myself at different times with an expression on my face, and that was expression I remember. I could feel it. I remember seeing it in my dad. I've seen some of my behavior that reflects my dad. So yes, how you raise your children is important. What they see you do will become more impactful to them than what they hear you say. Well, the second thing is be responsive to God's call and command. Now the angel appeared to Joseph, Matthew chapter 2 verse 20, he said, get up, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for the house where you are trying, for those who were trying to take the child's life are dead. So again, one of the things we talked about before, Joseph obeys God, goes home to Judea, learns that Herod's son is now in power. So he's probably just gotten into the outer regions of Judea. When he finds out that Archelaus is in power, he is worse than his dad in terms of being civil and respectful of the Jews and one thing and another. So Joseph says, I don't think I want to go there. Archelaus was noted for tyranny, murder, and instability. If his dad was mentally unstable, he is at least as much, if not more so. And seeing dad mentally unstable and being the leader of the land, hey, why can't I be more mentally unstable and still be the leader of the land? What are they going to do to me? Go back and check your Josephus, and maybe you'll find out what they did to him. Archelaus was later deposed by Rome in AD 6 to Vienna in Gaul. So he didn't stay in control of Judea for very long. When we fully trust in God, obedience is not a problem. When I try to do things on my own, obedience can be an issue. But if I'm fully trusting in God, obedience is a piece of cake. And there have been a lot of things over the last years that have given me time to worry, reason to worry. And if I leave God out of it, I can get a fairly decent worry going on. But if I start talking to God and I start thinking about this from God's perspective, or from, you know what, I'm not the only one in the world that's going through difficulty, I run out of stuff to worry about. Now the problem's still there, it's not solved at all. The situation hasn't gotten any better, but it's kind of like, well, it's not my problem anyhow, it's God's problem to solve. It's God's job to make this ministry do something more than impact just one little group. I mean, I'm trying to help him all I can, and I'm praying for him to help me help him so we can be successful. But it's God's problem, not mine. And sometimes I try to fret about it, and about that time I realize, well, it's not mine, and so I learn that trusting in God, obedience is not a problem. The challenge is to know when God is speaking to us. Now, is that God speaking, or is that the devil trying to influence me to misbehave? Or believe the devil will come around and pretend that he's God, and he'll do everything he can to try to get you to do things you shouldn't be doing. Well, we want to also be responsible for our child's spiritual development. So Matthew chapter 2, verse 21 through 23, and here we have Luke chapter 2, verse 39 and through 42 getting in on this picture. Joseph got up, took the child and his mother, he went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. Having been warned of a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee, and he went and lived in a town called Nazareth. So was fulfilled what was said to the prophets, he will be called a Nazarene. And Luke just says they returned to Galilee, to their own town of Nazareth. So he's gone full circle. Nazareth, down to Bethlehem, over to Egypt, and now wiggly whack some which way back to Nazareth. Continuing on, Luke says, and the child grew and became strong and was filled with wisdom, and the grace of God was upon him. And every year his parents went to Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover. And when he was 12, they went up to the feast according to the custom. Now here's our little map. We've got Joseph and Mary. I'm presuming that they just went far enough into Egypt to be in Egypt. Like I say, I don't know if they ever got over to see the pyramids. So this is the eastern region of Egypt, not too far from where the Israelites would have crossed over into, that's the Nile River there, so Israel would have crossed over in here somewhere and wandered around in the desert wilderness. Joseph and Mary probably took a little more northern route, closer to the greener, more fertile land, the sea coast, till they got up to Judea. Somewhere in here, now they could have come over towards Jerusalem, but they could also have come up the coast. And they hear that Archelaus is in power. The angel says, you just go on back home to Galilee. So he comes on up I would presume he'd go up the Mediterranean coast until he got up here to Nazareth, back to where they started from. Again, if I'm wrong, that's all right. You'll get me straightened out when we get to heaven. You are responsible for your child's spiritual development. Joseph is afraid of Archelaus, so for the sake of safety of Jesus and Mary, so the angel appears one last time, telling him to take the family to Nazareth. This fulfills the Old Testament prophecy. And notice that it's pointed out for us here. Joseph and Mary have now come full circle and are back to Nazareth from where they started. God often reveals His will on a need-to-know basis. How many times have you wished that God would just tell you a little bit more into the future so you kind of know where you're going, well, you kind of know what's coming? How many people go to horoscopes or witch doctors or palm readers or what, because they think they want to know the future? I don't know if that's always a good thing to know, especially if the future is not promising and not encouraging. Of course, if they don't tell you good things, you're not going to go back to them unless you're a gloom and doom person and you just like punishing yourself. But I think I'm just noticing, Sylvia made a comment about somebody asking about palm readers or fortune tellers or this sort of thing. And I just thought back in the Old Testament, every time somebody went to a fortune teller in the Old Testament, they met with tragedy. Regardless of what the fortune teller told them, they met with tragedy. Maybe that should be just a hint to us. That's one place we don't want to go. But just trust God. You know, all we really need is enough light to make the next step. It would be nice to see a little further down the road, to see the next 2 or 3 or 4 steps are going to be there, and not all of a sudden a turn in the path. But maybe there's some reasons why God doesn't want us to know that.
Didn't somebody go visit the witch in Endor?
Yes.
That's all.
And it happened more than once that they went to a witch or a fortune teller or somebody, a soothsayer, and every time they met with tragedy. So, now, God always also trusts you with the spiritual development of your children. How are you being responsible for your child's physical and spiritual development? What are you doing? Well, my children are already gone. That book is closed. I will tell you this. I found out, and I realized it really by accident, by the grace of God. If you teach them to obey you when they're little, getting them to obey you when they're the same size you are is a whole lot easier. If you wait till they're older, you may never get them to obey you.
The book is never closed.
And so, I think it was Dobson that said from 1 to 5 you mold them, from 5 to 10 you bend them, from 10 to 15 you break them. So if you want to make life easier on yourself, or your children, or your grandchildren, or your great-grandchildren, teach their parents to mold them while there's time, so they don't have to bend them or break them.
Your relationship with them.
Yeah, 15, 16, it's kind of like I'm just hanging on till they get out of the house. If you don't have it done by then, it's rather unlikely, although there's always, nothing's absolute. But it's oftentimes too late. Here is a picture of Nazareth, some boys playing out there in a playground or play area. I don't know exactly what activity's going on. Looks like a ball game, almost. After the feast was over, Luke chapter 2:43, God's training will cover your mistakes. After the feast was over, while his parents were returning home, the boy Jesus stayed around in Jerusalem, but they were unaware of it. Thinking he was in their company, they traveled for a day and began looking for him among their relatives and friends. When they did not find him, they went back to Jerusalem to look for him. God's training will cover your mistakes. Just a quick show of hands. Have any parents here ever made a mistake raising with one of their kids? Once or twice? Yeah? Okay. I can see most of you are honest and the rest of you either don't have kids or you're in denial. One or the other.
I thought of River.
Jewish boys become sons of the law at age 12. Now, Luke is the only writer that tells us anything about Jesus as he's growing up. And so this story is when he's 12 years old. The family's going to the Feast of the Passover in Jerusalem, as all Jews are supposed to do. Now, all Jews are supposed to go there. It doesn't mean that all Jews always do go there. Some may go some years and not go other years. Some may say we can't afford to go. Or health or whatever circumstances may make it difficult for them to go. But if you were able-bodied, and at least able-bodied, you were expected to go to Jerusalem for 3 feasts during the year. Feast of Passovers, Feast of Tabernacle, and, oh, now it slips my mind. Passover, Tabernacles, and one more. Anyhow.
7 feasts.
Feast of Passover.
There were 3 feasts that they were required by the Mosaical law to go to. So
Pentecost.
Pentecost, thank you, sir.
That's the one.
Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacle. Tabernacle is in the fall, Passover in the spring, about the time we celebrate Easter roughly, and Pentecost is 50 days after Passover. Okay, Jews became sons of the law at age 12. So this family is going to go to the Feast of the Passover in Jerusalem, as all Jews are supposed to do. This is relevant to Jews, to Luke's Greek audience, to show that Jesus is human, yet godly minded. He's a boy, 12 years old, but he's got a mind on him that would baffle, well, we'll see about that in just a minute. They become sons of the law at age 12, required to attend the Feast of Passover, Pentecost, and Tabernacle. I had it written right down here in my notes. If I'd have looked just a little bit further, I'd have told you. Now, this is in contrast to our voluntary involvement in worship every Sunday. Aren't you glad that God doesn't require you to be in church every Sunday, or He's going to thump you with a big wet ouch? But if you love God, you'll say, why would I want to miss church on Sunday? Back when I was in high school and college, I thought I wanted to be a race car driver, but most races are on Sundays, and I believed the church was more important than going to the races. So I go to the races on Saturday, watch the other guys drive around and say, ooh, that was cool, man, look at that car go. But I was in church on Sunday morning, because in my heart, that's where my heart is, that's where I belong. So, most likely, this is not Jesus' first visit to the temple. But this one is very special because it will be a very significant event before it is through. As him being age 12, he's now considered a man, even though he's got a lot of growing up to do, like the terrible twos. The terrible twos, for those of you who are wondering, are not when they are 2 years old. It's the 2 years they're in junior high, or puberty, if you will. Child 1 minute, a man the next, and God help you parents if you can figure out which one it is. Oh, but it's a very special event. At the end of the feast, Joseph and Mary head for home with a caravan. They would travel in a caravan because the whole town, the whole nation came to Jerusalem for this feast. Now the whole nation is going home. So they're traveling with, at least 20, 30, 50, 100, maybe a couple hundred, maybe even a couple of thousand other Jewish friends from Nazareth and other regions around Galilee. And they'll all just kind of travel along there together, not think a whole lot of thing about it. They're on their way back home. And if Jesus has been with them before, he knows the routine. Kids pick up on the routine pretty fast. They're figure that Jesus is playing in the caravan with some other Jewish boys, and they're not worried about him. Jesus has always been a very obedient and trustworthy child. Now, contrary to what his brothers and sisters, Joseph and Mary didn't have a whole lot of problem teaching Jesus to obey. Maybe God gave them a special talent and they were just good at it. Maybe his brothers and sisters were more obedient than the typical children because Joseph and Mary were good at it. I don't know. Wasn't there. But Jesus was always very trustworthy and obedient, so no problem. He knows we're leaving. He was here with the crowd, and so he's somewhere around here. He'll catch up with us when we get settled down at the end of the day. After traveling for a full day, they start to look for Jesus, and they realize he is not there. He is not anywhere in the crowd. They're looking at this family, they're talking to that family, they're looking over here, they're asking over there, and nobody has seen anybody that fits the description of this child. Naturally alarmed, wouldn't you be? Even if it was your own child and not the Son of God. Wouldn't you be maybe a little more alarmed, if that was God's son that you're raising and you just lost? as opposed to one of his siblings that just kind of stuck around and missed the bus. And we've all heard stories of the family had the motorhome or a camper, and they go to the gas station, somebody gets out, goes into the bathroom, the family fills up, leaves, and the person's still stuck in the bathroom. Back before the days of cell phones, it was like maybe hours before mom and dad realized, oh no, he's not there, and we don't know where he is, and they can't call. And so they have to turn around, drive back, hope the kid's still there. The kid's saying, "Where's mommy and daddy? I'm scared. I'm here all alone." And they call the police, and the police can't get a hold of the parents because unless a highway patrolman managed just to chase them down or something like that. Today with cell phones, it's like, "Hey, mom and dad, you left me back here in the bathroom." "Oh, I'm so sorry. What are you doing in the bathroom? We got a bathroom in the motorhome. Why didn't you use it?" No, I want to use the other one. Anyhow, they look for Jesus. They are in I can imagine. They have traveled a whole day. They are in a panic. I think that would be an understatement of the word. Now, failing to find him, and it's too late to travel. They've been traveling all day. It's starting to get dark, or it's going to get dark soon. They can't go back now. Not up the Jericho road, alone, without an escort of a caravan. No, not safe. Jericho Road was very notorious for guys who like to step out of the bushes and say, give you a choice. They would say your money or your life. That's your choice. They get a good night's rest. They head back up the Jericho Road the next day to see if they can find Jesus and find out where he is and get things back up. But going down the Jericho Road, catch the word there? That's about 5,000 foot drop, I believe. I don't think I've got that in here. Going back up the Jericho Road, you're talking about 13 miles, I think it is. But you're climbing several thousand feet. Jericho's below sea level. Dead Sea is way below sea level. Jerusalem is above sea level. Pretty healthy piece. 4 or 5, I think around 4,000 or 5,000 feet. So, I mean, this is not an insignificant hill climb. So, by the time they get back to Jerusalem, it's nighttime. They are tired. They've got to get another night's rest. 2 days. They arrive in Jerusalem too late to search for him in more than maybe 1 or 2 places. They don't find him. Another night of rest. Now they've got a full day to search for him the 3rd day. God has entrusted you with the job of raising your children in a way that will honor him. What kind of anxieties would you be feeling if you had lost a child and traveled a day's journey before you even realized it? And you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have police and helicopters and all this sort of thing to bring your child to you. You were stuck to taking another day to go back to where the last place you knew you had your child and see if he is still there, or if he's been kidnapped, snake bit, hurt by a wild animal, who knows whatever other number of things could happen to a child, even a young man 12 years old. Not always, much maybe more skilled in the ways of survival and the ways of the world than most 12-year-olds today, but still not enough to be totally free of home.
I think one of the biggest things is that they were embarrassed the fact that, hey, this kid got away from them. You know, like, uh-oh. I mean, they should be more on top of things and not let that happen.
As a parent, yeah, just the fact that I lost my child. Now, in a big crowd, they might kind of excuse it a little bit, but yeah, it would be a little humiliating to say, oh, I was just not paying attention and I lost my child. And it was 3 days before I could find him again. And they didn't run away. They just weren't with us when we went away. And was that Christmas Home Alone? They made movies on that. On this kind, they don't go back and get the child. They just kind of leave him there. I couldn't imagine a parent doing that. Makes for a funny movie, but not anywhere near practical. Well, as we said, God's training will cover your mistakes. Here's part 2. After the 3 days, they found him in the temple courts, sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. Now, everyone who heard him was amazed at his understanding and his answers. And when his parents saw him, they were astonished, and his mother said to him, "Son, why have you treated us like this?" I don't think she shook him, but maybe she probably wanted to really, really bad. Your father and I have been anxiously searching for you. I can just imagine a mother's emotions communicating that message. Jesus says, why are you searching for me? He asked. Did you know I had to be in my Father's house? They did not understand what he was saying to them. Then he went down to Nazareth with them and was obedient to them, but his mother treasured all these things in her heart. Alan?
I like the King James. I think it says, did you not know that I had to be about my Father's business?
Yeah.
Yeah, my Father's. That's kind of cool.
It's kind of like this little 12-year-old whippersnapper thinks he knows things that I don't. I'm your mother. I'm your father. What are you doing thinking you can stay behind and do something? Well, how are you going to refute an answer like that? Especially when you realize who his real father really is. Okay. Hey, at least you're alive and well, and we are not in big trouble with God because we lost his son in the supermarket or at the gas station or wherever. What would you feel if you lost a child?
Devastating.
We're trying to, yes.
One, but I had one run away.
You really don't have any feeling. You're searching heavy,
Right.
hard.
I wonder just how it would be though, raising the Son of God as a father. That would have to be a little difficult to say the least.
Make you feel like
That would be a little bit challenging.
Yeah.
Well, God has entrusted you with a job in raising your children in a way that will honor Him. And what kind of anxieties would you feel if you lost a child and traveled a day's journey before you realized it? Now, what is the reaction of the priest to have a youth sitting and asking, Joseph and Mary finally find the Son of God that's entrusted to them to raise. Can you imagine your relief in finding him safe and sound, and their astonishment of what he's doing? Not only is he safe and sound, but this kid is teaching the teachers. A kid, a child teaching the teachers. Now I know, smarter than a fifth grader. Okay, yeah, sometimes the children can teach the old folks a few things that we have forgotten that we used to do. Of course, back when we were in fifth grade, they taught us things that they don't teach some of the kids today, and they should. But that's a whole other discussion.
I heard, I saw a show one time about parents of child prodigies, and how it's not a normal childhood, or a normal parenthood. It's, they have to adjust what they think it is to raise a child.
You get a specially gifted child, it can put some specially challenging differences on how you would raise the other children. Jesus has spent the last 3 days involved in intellectual, theological conversation with the Jewish teachers, priests. What is the reaction of the priest to have a youth asking such challenging questions and posing answers beyond their level of learning? We kind of get used to, well, this is what our church teaches. And we've got our favorite pet doctrines. As much as we claim to be and try to be a non-denominational church, we want to be just the doctrines of the Bible that makes doctrines. But sometimes our human interpretations and our past and our history kind of influences, and we still struggle with that. We'll struggle with that till we get to heaven. Fortunately, we can recognize that there's going to be some things that we may not always agree 100%. We can still love each other because we got the bottom line. The bottom line is, who is Jesus? And as long as we've got that bottom line, we can either work these other things out or they don't matter. One or the other.
I can imagine some of those priests were like, well, son, how do you know that? Who's your father?
There might have been that kind of questioning going on. Yes, People are amazed at his level of understanding and the answers he poses to those who are supposed to be the teachers. Joseph and Mary confront Jesus, but he replies that he's been obedient, true to his true father. Now that's kind of a bold statement to make to your earthly mother and father. I haven't been disobedient to you. I've been obedient to my father. Step-parents might understand that just a little bit. Already, Jesus has a sense that his life on earth is very important and has a very important, very special mission. He's eager and willing and diligent to seek it out and to complete it. So how did Joseph feel hearing his son refer to God as his father? You've raised this child up as your own son, your own flesh, your own seed, and all of a sudden he's not calling you his father anymore. He's acknowledging he has another father. Any parent that's, I know I've heard stories where a girl got pregnant and the father wouldn't marry her, and some other man would come and marry her and be a father to her child as though it were his own child. And there have been some that have done that and done very well at it. But how would you feel if you're raising that child and one day he comes up and says, "You're not my father. I found my father and I'm doing what he's called me or given me to do"? Alan?
I think it's astounding that the priest that we're talking with him would have heard this, maybe heard him talking to his mother saying about his father, because I don't think they thought of God as the father. He was the king, he was the supreme being, but the father?
Father?
Yeah, I think this is probably the first time
That
you
may
see
be
that
a new
referred.
concept to him too.
Yeah.
Morty?
Yeah, there's also another aspect of him. He had that dream concerning, he tossed and turned all night, and then the Holy Spirit said to him, "Now, don't be afraid to take her as your wife. You don't do that, because what's been conceived in her is of the Holy Spirit," and so on.
So
He
Joseph
carried that in
knows.
his heart, he knew.
Joseph knows down here. So, yeah, but still, I'd say, 12 years I've been raising this son. He's been very obedient, just the best child a parent could ever ask for. His brothers and sisters are good, but not quite as good, if you know what I mean. And all of a sudden, to hear him say that I'm about my father's business would have to have a little bit of an impact. Isn't it good to know that you aren't the only parents who've made a mistake? If God can trust Joseph and Mary with Jesus, in spite of their mistake, could He not also trust you to raise children in a way that will please Him? How are you helping your children to fulfill their purpose in life? Now again, if your children are grown, then you can try to influence your grandchildren. And maybe encourage your children in how to influence their children. So don't think that you're out of the people influencing business just yet. You got breath in your lungs and you've got a heartbeat in your heart and waves going through your brain. That's because there's radio stations all over and you can't get away from the radio. You still have the power to reason and speak and communicate. You have the power to influence. And parents, oftentimes grandparents can be maybe a little more influential than parents because they're not quite so close to the situation. They can see some things that aren't always seen otherwise. Well, we have our map here. Here's Jerusalem going down the road to Jericho and across to Bethany. They were probably around Jericho when they realized that Jesus was missing. And as I said, they had to go all the way back uphill. This is kind of elevation colored. So this is below sea level around the Dead Sea. This is right just barely a little below sea level. Here you're going up, you're going up, you're going up more, you're going up more, you're going up more. Right up this river valley here, right up into Jerusalem. It'd be quite a trip. Well, godly parenting produces balanced growth. Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. Jesus grows strong in wisdom and stature and favor with God and men. He will do well in school. He will be healthy. He will be respected by everyone around him. All are worthy goals for us. Even though we're grown, to be well, and some of us would like to be a little more well than we are. But getting to the point to where the well is kind of breaking down a little bit and wearing us out and telling us this world is not my home. But we can encourage others and we can do the best we can to be well, and we can do things that will be respected by all by the integrity, how we live our lives and how we influence others for Jesus and the ways that He's gifted us to do. How much would it mean to you to know in advance that your child is never going to suffer serious harm mentally or physically? We assume that our child will not die before becoming an adult, but we have no promise. If any of you've lost a child, you know that as soon as they're born, actually in some cases, like one of our great-granddaughters, she went to heaven before she was born, was stillborn, and was alive the day before. But God in His great mercy and wisdom did what He did for reasons. When we get to heaven, He'll explain it to us. And until then, we just praise God for this spirit that is waiting, that we'll get to meet when we get there. We assume that we'll outgrow our children, but we have no promise. And we assume that our children would grow healthy and strong and smart. How would you feel if you knew without a doubt that your child will grow strong and healthy and smart and do something great for God and mankind? We dream, we hope, we plan, but in the ultimate end, there comes a point where they make the decision for themselves and they choose to walk with God or they choose not to walk with God. And we can say, well, I did the best I knew how, and I love them, but they're in God's hands now. And sometimes it's hard for us to let go, but that's the challenge. Well, conclusion, God also trusts you with the spiritual development of your children. Are you helping your children fulfill their purpose? Next week, we're going to look into the life of John the Baptist. Who is this wild man in the wilderness? Maybe he's a redneck, I don't know. Okay, Sylvia? It's time for discussion questions. You can turn over to... To keep up with what is happening, follow Glenn Koppel, GMC for Jesus, or Getting to Know Jesus on Plaxo, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and check out our other videos on YouTube.